Hey there folks, the Infinite Jukebox here with another quick album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Sinephro record, Endlessness. It was 3 years ago, back in 2021, that Belgium-born jazz multi-instrumentalist Sinephro put out her first full-length studio album, Space 1.8, and it was with the aforementioned record that she fairly immediately became a known and highly respected name within jazz circles on the more progressive and the more adventurous side, as the spacey and ambient-focused nature of that record ultimately provided one of the best, most unique, and overall most pleasant listening experiences that the entire genre had to offer, not only 2021, but just the decade in general so far. Her latest studio album, Endlessness, provides a similar pleasant experience while also taking her sound in a different direction or two that honestly feels more intriguing than ever before. In fact, I actually think this record somehow manages to be a slight improvement over her debut. Much of Endlessness as a listening experience still hones in on the spaced out nature of her debut, but that is not a bad thing whatsoever when that exact sound is something that she is capable of pulling off pretty brilliantly, generally speaking. Endlessness is a deeply atmospheric record and knows how to properly execute an atmospheric listening experience that still manages to feel fleshed out and never overly minimalistic to the point that things feel like they never progress in any particular direction. And that largely stems from some absolutely phenomenal production provided by Sinephro herself here, which is extremely spacious and ultimately provides a certain openness to the record that allows the various corners of the instrumentation to succeed in a soundscape that allows them to move around freely, while at the same time causing these instrumentals that are individually somewhat restrained to melt together into something that feels very colorful and extremely bright in certain moments, yet at the time subdued and cold in other passages, allowing for an album that really does go through a variety of motions and movements and keeps the listener engaged throughout its entire runtime. And the instrumentation itself is predictably fantastic as well, and Sinephro herself is what largely defines this. Of course, that comes as no shock considering, well, her name is on the record, but nonetheless, it is still something worth pointing out. With her being a multi-instrumentalist, her contributions via the usage of synths and the harp make for an interesting and stylistically unique record that couldn't really be made by very many, if anybody else, within modern jazz, jazz fusion, experimental jazz, whatever you would personally like to consider this record. And that isn't to mention the various other performers that make Endlessness the instrumentally strong record that it is. This album wouldn't be the same without appearances from people like saxophonist Nubia Garcia or drummer Nassiat Wakili, both of whom act as Sinephro's frequent collaborators, if you will, and here they add a lot to the general dynamics of the record. Even fellow keyboard player Lyle Barton shows up to deliver some strong work, especially with the lead synth work on Continuum 3, highlighting his abilities behind that particular instrument. I mean, this is just a record filled with fresh yet talented musicians, so it is no surprise that both of those qualities really do shine a lot throughout Endless. But perhaps the biggest thing that defines Endlessness away from its predecessor is that it arguably has an even bigger focus on electronic passages than Space 1.8, a record already somewhat focused on electronic as a contribution to jazz, ever really had. And while some may not enjoy this due to the sort of inherent betrayal of traditional jazz that comes with electronic incorporations, there is also very little chance that you are even remotely attracted to Sinephro's music in the first place if you think that Miles Davis stopped making good music after Kind of Blue. I don't think that this is even something that would be on your radar if you weren't open to jazz fusion. There are even a few moments here where things kind of ditch jazz almost entirely to focus on Tangerine Dream-esque, largely ambient movements and passages, and this is something that was explored to a slightly lesser extent again on Space 1.8, and it ultimately suits the laid-back yet adventurous style of Endlessness very nicely, and this all provides this sort of nice edge of artistic evolution, if you will, for Sinephro on her sophomore studio album, and she handles it beyond well as she entirely avoids the sophomore slump by incorporating a lot of elements here that weren't necessarily seen in full form on her previous album that are really coming into a beautiful fruition here on her sophomore studio album. I really do think Endlessness takes some of the best qualities of her debut and enhances them while introducing some new ideas along the way. Endlessness did something that some likely assumed was not possible, improved upon Space 1.8, and while Sinephro's debut may not be perfect in the most literal sense of the term, it nonetheless still to this day, 3 years onwards, stands as one of the most memorable major jazz experiences of the last few years. Of all of the jazz records that have circled into music discussion circles beyond just the first and foremost jazz community, that have kind of gone into wider forms of discussion, Space 1.8 has easily been one of the best, and the fact that Endlessness is not only capable of matching one of the most beloved jazz debuts of recent years in terms of quality, but also manages to surpass it in certain ways due to a slight change in direction that is nonetheless extraordinarily interesting is undoubtedly impressive. And if she continues the hot streak that she is currently on, Nala Sinephro is surely going to end up being one of the more notable names and performers of the current era of jazz 40, 50 years from now, or at the very least, I would hope so if there were any justice in the world. I'm going to give this record 4 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this quick album review. Thank you for watching The Infinite Jukebox, and I'll see you in the next one.